The Hoenn region marked a turning point in the history of the series. Released on the Game Boy Advance in the year 2002 in Japan and 2003 internationally, these games brought players into a world that felt brighter and more alive than ever before. The hardware leap allowed for a new level of detail in graphics and sound, which made Hoenn stand out instantly from the previous regions. Its identity as a lush tropical setting with oceans that spanned across much of the map was unlike anything seen before. For many players, this was their first experience with a Pokémon adventure drenched in sunlight and filled with beaches, rainforests, and volcanoes. The decision to set the story in such a water-heavy landscape was deliberate. The developers wanted to push the Game Boy Advance to its limits with mechanics that emphasized environment. This included an expanded surfing system, currents that pushed players through the waves, and diving which allowed exploration of the ocean floor. Diving in particular became one of the most memorable innovations of the era. For the first time, players could descend beneath the waves and discover hidden caverns and Pokémon that could not be found anywhere else. This simple feature added a sense of real exploration that mirrored scuba diving adventures in the real world. The visual identity of Hoenn was carefully crafted. Palettes were brighter, routes were lush with greenery, and the music carried a trumpet-heavy soundtrack that matched the region's lively atmosphere. Towns such as Slateport reflected bustling coastal commerce, while Fortree was built high in the treetops, creating a strong sense of variety across the land. The mix of human design and natural wonder was intentional. Game Freak drew inspiration from the Kyushu region of Japan, which is known for its volcanic mountains, warm climate, and rich cultural history. This influence is clear in Hoenn's geography, where volcanic Mount Chimney stands near tropical coasts and small towns rest comfortably near ancient ruins. Beyond geography, Hoenn introduced important technical firsts. Double battles debuted here, changing the way trainers thought about combat. Suddenly, moves that targeted multiple foes or supported an ally had practical uses. Weather effects also became core mechanics, as rain, sun, sandstorms, and hail could persist across battles. These elements were not just visual flair, they altered strategies and defined entire teams in competitive play. Rain teams relied on enhanced water attacks, while sunlight boosted fire and enabled faster grass growth. Hoenn was the birthplace of what later became known as weather wars in competitive history. The lore of Hoenn tied directly into its elemental diversity. Unlike previous regions that centered mainly on legendary birds or beasts, Hoenn built its mythology around the balance of sea, land, and sky. This trinity shaped not only the story of the games, but also the design philosophy. The seas represented abundance and chaos, the land represented stability and growth, and the sky represented harmony. This philosophical grounding made Hoenn feel like a region with deeper roots in myth and symbolism than its predecessors. What made Hoenn obscure and fascinating to longtime fans were the small details hidden in its world. Mirage Island, for example, was a rare phenomenon that appeared only under precise conditions, making it one of the most elusive locations in any Pokémon game. Inside, players could encounter Wynaut, a baby form that connected to earlier Pokémon lines through breeding mechanics. Few players ever saw the island without external manipulation, which gave it legendary status in fan discussions. Another hidden gem was the Trick House, a structure filled with puzzles that updated over time as badges were earned. This quirky feature rewarded curiosity and added replayability to the journey, The region's cultural design went beyond myth and mechanics. Hoenn introduced contests, a system that gave Pokémon purpose outside of battle. In these contests, creatures showed off beauty, coolness, toughness, cleverness, or cuteness through moves and performances. This reflected a different way to value partners, emphasizing presentation and personality rather than raw strength. For many players, this was their first time thinking about their Pokémon as companions with charm and individuality rather than only combat roles. Obscure trivia also surrounds the development process. The leap to the Game Boy Advance meant abandoning compatibility with previous generations. This decision was controversial at the time, as players could not transfer their old partners into the new region. Yet it also gave the developers freedom to design Hoenn as a fresh start without worrying about balancing hundreds of existing creatures. Over time, new methods were introduced to reintroduce older Pokémon, but Hoenn stood as a bold declaration that the franchise was evolving. All these factors combined to make Hoenn unique. It was a region of bright visuals, experimental mechanics, cultural depth, and bold risks. Its tropical identity gave it a flavor all its own, and its emphasis on weather, environment, and myth ensured it would never be mistaken for a simple copy of what came before. Every region begins with its trio of starters, and Hoenn's group of Trico, Torchic, and Mudkip became instant favorites for many. These creatures represented the tropical balance of forest, fire, and water that defined the region. Each one carried design choices tied to both culture and competitive history, ensuring they left a mark far beyond their role as first companions. Trico, the grass choice, embodied agility and independence. Its sleek lizard design reflected geckos found in warm climates, and its evolutionary line emphasized speed and confidence. In competitive play, its final form became known for high speed and strong offensive power, able to outpace many opponents. Cultural interpretations tied it to traits of quick thinking and resilience, qualities admired in both nature and battle. Torchic, the fire choice, may have seemed unassuming at first as a small chick, yet its evolutionary line transformed dramatically, becoming a powerful fighter that blended martial arts inspiration with flame. This combination of avian design and human-like combat style was unusual at the time and became iconic. In the competitive scene, its final form gained notoriety for raw power and sweeping potential, dominating early metagames until later balance changes adjusted its impact. Mudkip, the water choice, drew inspiration from amphibious creatures found in wetlands. Its evolutionary line emphasized adaptability, growing into a bulky and powerful fighter known for resilience. In competitive play, its final form became a cornerstone for defensive strategies, offering both utility and raw strength. Mudkip itself gained a special place in popular culture due to fan memes and jokes that made it one of the most recognizable Pokémon of its generation. What makes these starters obscure in a historical sense are the details around their design and development. Early concept art showed different directions the team considered before finalizing them. Torchic at one point was sketched with more dragon-like features, while Mudkip's line had variations in its fin structure. These early designs hint at how carefully the developers refined each starter to fit both the region and the balance between grass, fire, and water. Another obscure fact is the way these starters influenced later games. Double battle mechanics in Hoenn highlighted how they could support partners, with moves designed to assist allies or control field effects. Torchic's line gained an ability that made it a terror in doubles, while Mudkip's line took on roles as both attacker and defender. Even Trico's line contributed through speed-based strategies. This balance of individual power and team utility reflected how Hoenn's starters were designed with new mechanics in mind. Contests also gave the trio new life. Each line excelled in different contest categories, showing off traits beyond battling. Torchic's line shone in coolness, Mudkip's in toughness, and Trico's in cleverness. This ensured that players could connect with them not only through combat, but through performance, expanding their personalities in ways unique to Hoenn. The legacy of these starters extended far beyond their original games. They returned in remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire with updated models and moves, ensuring new generations could experience their charm. Competitive shifts across eras meant that their final forms moved in and out of prominence, but their core identities remained beloved. The cultural presence of Mudkip memes, the competitive legend of Torchic's final form, and the sleek reputation of Trico's line ensured they would never fade from memory. The starter trio of Hoenn thus embodied the region's themes of adaptability, culture, and bold design. They were companions who grew alongside players, reflections of the tropical world they inhabited, and enduring symbols of the third generation's willingness to innovate. At the heart of Hoenn's mythology lies a legendary trinity. Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza embodied the primal forces of the world, shaping the region's identity through tales of conflict and balance. Their story set a new standard for legendary lore in the series, intertwining gameplay with myth in ways no region had attempted before. The first of these beings was Groudon tied to the land. Descriptions within Pokédex entries tell of its power to expand continents and cause volcanic eruptions. Its massive body, clad in crimson armor, reflected its association with tectonic might and unyielding ground. In the story, its awakening was tied to droughts and sunlight, a destructive force that threatened to overwhelm Hoenn. Players encountered this creature in Ruby or Emerald versions, where its presence was accompanied by weather that dried the earth and raised temperatures. The idea of a Pokémon literally altering the climate in real time was unprecedented, showing how the developers used mechanics to reinforce narrative. The second guardian Kyogre ruled the sea. Said to have created oceans, it represented the other extreme of Hoenn's ecosystem. Its design, reminiscent of whales and deep-sea leviathans, emphasized vastness and depth. In Sapphire or Emerald versions, its awakening unleashed torrential rainstorms, flooding the land and shifting the balance of nature. This mechanic tied battles to narrative once again, as weather effects raged throughout the encounter. Players experienced firsthand how power on a mythic scale could alter not just lore, but gameplay. The third member, Rayquaza, descended from the sky when the other two clashed. Dwelling in the ozone layer, it remained unseen until summoned by catastrophe. In Emerald version, the cutscene of this dragon, like being calming storms and silencing magma, remains one of the most memorable moments of the series. Its emerald scales and serpentine body drew from myths of celestial dragons, said to mediate between heaven and earth. By descending to silence both Groudon and Kyogre, Rayquaza embodied harmony and the restoration of balance. Obscure details highlight how these beings were inspired by cultural traditions. Groudon reflected gods tied to soil and volcano. Kyogre mirrored deities of sea and flood. Rayquaza echoed dragons that command storms and link sky to earth. Together they created a mythological framework within Hoenn that felt timeless. Their competitive roles reinforced their lore, Groudon's drought empowered fire and weakened water. Kyogre's drizzle summoned endless rain that enhanced aquatic strategies. Rayquaza's airlock cleared all weather conditions. These abilities laid the foundation for weather wars that shaped competitive battles for generations. Beyond mechanics, their cultural presence spread into other media. Movies, trading cards, and toys turned them into icons. Debates about whether land could outlast sea or if sky was truly the strongest carried from playground conversations to online communities. By tying mechanics, lore, and culture together, Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza became some of the most memorable legendaries in the entire franchise. Hidden deep within Hoenn were three beings known as Regirock, Regis, and Registeel. These legendaries did not alter continents or summon storms, but their obscurity made them unforgettable. Unlike other guardians, they were locked behind riddles, braille inscriptions, and unique trials that required patience and creativity to solve. The first of the three was Regirock, a guardian formed entirely of stone. Lore described its body as being rebuilt with rocks whenever damaged, giving it endless resilience. This imagery reflected mountains that erode and rebuild over time, emphasizing durability. Encountering it required navigating sealed chambers and deciphering clues, making the eventual discovery feel earned rather than given. The second was Regis, a crystalline body formed during an ancient ice age. Its lore suggested it could never melt, even when exposed to flames. The sight of its frozen body in the cave chambers added an aura of timelessness, as though it had been preserved for thousands of years, awaiting rediscovery. The puzzles tied to its chamber asked players to pay attention and trust instructions written in Braille, reinforcing the idea that this guardian demanded patience. The third was Registeel, the being of tempered metal. Said to be made from material harder than any known alloy, it embodied technology and endurance. Its chamber emphasized structure and design, highlighting the unnatural and mechanical qualities of its form. Among the three, it stood out as the most artificial, a relic that blurred the line between nature and invention. Together, Regirock, Regis, and Registeel required players to first unlock their chambers by using Relicanth and Wailord in their party. This unusual requirement forced trainers to search far and wide for specific companions, deepening the sense of archaeological effort. Once inside, Braille inscriptions provided cryptic instructions, such as waiting silently or using moves in unconventional ways. These puzzles were unlike anything in the series up to that point, transforming the process of discovery into something that felt ancient and sacred. The choice of Braille was significant. It introduced players to a real-world writing system, encouraging learning and curiosity beyond the game. Many fans still recall tracing Braille guides or asking others to translate, turning the Regis into an educational as well as mythical experience. Their visual designs furthered the sense of mystery, with dot-like eyes that resembled inscriptions rather than pupils. They appeared alien, as though they were constructs rather than creatures. This design drew from folklore of golems, beings brought to life through sacred texts. The developers gave these Pokémon a chilling presence, unlike anything else in Hoenn. In competitive battles, Regis became renowned for absorbing special attacks. Regirock specialized in physical defense, while Registeel offered a balanced role with utility. They did not dominate, yet their uniqueness earned them places on certain teams. For dedicated players, mastering their quirks became a badge of pride. Later generations added new members to their family, but in Hoenn, the Regis stood as puzzles and relics. To capture them was not simply to battle, but to prove perseverance, patience, and curiosity. Regirock, Regis, and Registeel were not gods of land or sea, but they were living monuments to forgotten history, their obscurity giving them a lasting legacy in the world of Pokémonday. Among the most mysterious figures in Hoenn's mythology are Latias and Latios. These siblings embodied duality, guardians of the region who balanced empathy and intelligence with swift power. Their lore revealed creatures both ancient and modern, blending futuristic elements with timeless myth. Latios was described as able to sense human emotions, a being of compassion that protected those it trusted. Its body, sleek and aerodynamic, was said to refract light to make itself invisible. This ability captured the imagination of players who saw it as a guardian hidden in plain sight. Encountering Latias required patience and chance as it roamed freely across the region after the main story. Few players managed to track it down without persistence, making the moment of capture all the more rewarding. Latios, counterpart to Latias, symbolized wisdom and insight. Its design suggested advanced technology, blending organic and mechanical traits. In lore, it was said to understand human speech and respond with intelligence, bridging the gap between trainer and Pokémonday. In Emerald version, Latios or Latias could be chosen by the player after defeating the champion, adding narrative weight to their role as guardians. What made these siblings obscure was the way they blurred traditional categories. Unlike other legendaries tied directly to natural disasters or ancient ruins, they felt like companions from another world. Their designs carried futuristic notes, as though they belonged in both myth and science fiction. This dual identity sparked fan interpretations that they were engineered or linked to forgotten technology. Their presence extended into other media, particularly the fifth Pokémon movie, which highlighted their role as protectors of a hidden city. This portrayal reinforced their aura of mystery and kindness, showing that they were more than forces of destruction. They symbolized care, empathy, and the bond between humans and Pokémonday. In competitive history, Latias and Latios introduced new challenges. Their unique typing, combined with strong stats and access to powerful moves, made them threats in high-level battles. The introduction of the Soul Dew item further enhanced their abilities, boosting their power to levels that often required restrictions in organized play. These decisions showed how even compassionate guardians could shake the foundations of competition. By blending compassion with power, Latias and Latios stood apart as symbols of trust and guardianship. Their rarity in the overworld and their futuristic designs made them legends that felt both alien and familiar, creatures that embodied the heart and soul of Hoenn itself. Hoenn introduced some of the strangest evolutionary concepts in the entire series. Shedinja and Kecleon exemplified this spirit of experimentation, creatures whose mechanics puzzled players and created stories of their own. Shedinja was obtained only through a unique method. When a Nincada evolved into Ninjask, a player with an empty slot in their party and a spare Pokeball would receive an additional Pokémonday. This being was the hollow shell left behind, given life through mysterious means. Its design reflected this origin, a bug-like husk with a halo hovering above it. What made it truly strange was its ability, Wonder Guard, which allowed it to be hit only by super effective moves. To newcomers, it seemed invincible until they realized its single hit point made it fragile to the slightest effective strike. This balance of unstoppable defense and extreme vulnerability gave it legendary status in fan discussions. Kecleon, by contrast, puzzled players with its ability to change type. In battle, when struck by a move, it would shift to that type, altering strategy on the spot. Encounters in the overworld emphasized this trick, as the creature was invisible until revealed by a special device. This mechanic tied exploration and combat together, making Kecleon stand out not as a powerhouse, but as a quirky oddity that left players with lasting memories. Obscure details surround both of these Pokémonde. Shedinja's lore described it as stealing the spirit of anyone who peered into the crack on its back, a chilling detail that contrasted with the calm adventure of the games. Kecleon's invisibility mechanic connected to themes of perception, challenging players to see what was hidden in plain sight. These touches reinforced Hoenn's identity as a region unafraid to experiment with unusual ideas, and their unside and as region self as no bod and 17 Hoenns of this bin. In competitive settings, Shedinja became a niche strategy. Protected by teammates that eliminated threats it could not handle, it turned into an unexpected win condition against unprepared foes. Kecleon's shifting types made it unpredictable, though its stats limited its overall impact. Still, both creatures added depth to Hoenn's roster, showing that innovation did not always mean raw power, but sometimes creativity and surprise. Their cultural impact endured through appearances in later games and media. Shedinja remained a symbol of eerie mystery, while Kecleon appeared in side games like Pokémon Mystery Dungeon with roles that highlighted its peculiar nature. Together, they showed how Hoenn's design philosophy valued experimentation, creating oddities that fascinated players for years to come. Among all of Hoenn's creatures, few captured imagination quite like Milotic. From the moment players first learned of its existence, it became a symbol of mystery and beauty. Unlike many Pokémon that were introduced through straightforward encounters, Milotic required patience, effort, and an unusual path to obtain, which made it stand apart as one of the most elusive achievements of the region. Milotic was the evolution of Feebas, a fish that seemed deliberately unimpressive at first glance. Its appearance was plain, its stats underwhelming, and its rarity legendary. Feebas could be found only on a handful of tiles across certain waterways. In Ruby and Sapphire, those tiles were tied to the trendy phrase Enduford, while in Emerald, they rotated daily. This meant that players might fish in the same spot endlessly without success, while others stumbled upon it by accident. Guides eventually appeared online to map out its spawns, but in the early years of Ruby and Sapphire, many children spent countless hours casting lines into the waters of Hoenn without ever realizing that the secret of Milotic lay hidden in their persistence. What made the evolution even more obscure was the requirement tied not to battles, but to contests. To evolve Feebas, its beauty condition had to be raised with Pokeblocks, a system that demanded berry collection, blending, and participation in a part of the game that many players considered optional. Those who ignored contests could play through the entire adventure without ever unlocking Milotic, which gave it an aura of secrecy. The link between elegance and evolution was intentional. The developers wanted players to see that beauty was not only an aesthetic measure, but a transformative power. By participating in contests and caring about presentation, trainers discovered that even a drab fish could become one of the most breathtaking Pokémon in the series. Design inspiration for Milotic drew heavily from classical depictions of sea serpents and mythological creatures associated with beauty. Its long, flowing body and delicate fins resembled paintings of nymphs or sirens, while its pastel coloring gave it an ethereal quality. The contrast to Gyarados was unmistakable, Where that creature embodied rage and destruction, Milotic embodied calm and serenity. Pokédex entries emphasized its ability to soothe hostility in those who beheld it, presenting it as a guardian of peace rather than a monster of power. This deliberate contrast made the evolutionary line one of the most striking examples of duality in Pokémon design. Obscure trivia around Milotic's development reveals how the design team wrestled with balancing rarity, lore, and practicality. Some early notes suggested making Feebas available through even rarer means, but developers feared that too many players would never see Milotic at all. The compromise of limited water tiles and daily shifts ensured that it remained challenging without being impossible. Even so, for years Milotic became shorthand in fan circles for elusive catches, often compared to stories of children who swore they had fished every tile yet never encountered it. Milotic's role in contests further reinforced its identity. While many Pokémon participated in categories of coolness or toughness, this elegant serpent excelled in beauty, becoming a staple for players seeking ribbons and high scores. Its animations, gliding gracefully across the contest stage, matched its lure perfectly. This made it one of the few Pokémon that felt equally at home in competitive battles and in aesthetic showcases, embodying Hoenn's design philosophy that creatures could have value beyond combat. In competitive battling, Milotic filled a niche as a durable water type with strong recovery. Its ability, which punished foes for reducing its stats, gave it staying power. While it was not the most dominant presence in top-level play, it found steady use in formats that valued balance. Trainers who wanted both function and style often chose it, making it a rare case where beauty did not come at the expense of practicality. Its presence in teams showed that elegance and strength were not opposites but complementary. Milotic's influence extended into culture and fandom. It became a favorite subject of fan art, often depicted as a goddess of the sea or a muse of beauty. Merchandise highlighted its flowing form, with plushes and figurines capturing its delicate details. In the anime, it appeared in contests and as partners of skilled coordinators, reinforcing its status as an icon of elegance. Players who struggled to obtain it in the games found solace in these appearances, as though the series was reminding them that the pursuit of beauty and patience was itself part of the journey. Remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire retained Milotic's elusive nature but streamlined some aspects of Feebas's rarity. This decision acknowledged the difficulty of the original method, while preserving the idea that patience was required. Even with modern conveniences, trainers still felt satisfaction when finally evolving their Feebas. The thrill of transforming something plain into something magnificent remained intact, ensuring that Milotic's legacy endured. Fan interpretations have also shaped its mystique. Some saw it as a symbol of personal growth, a reminder that perseverance could turn even the most overlooked individual into something extraordinary. Others viewed it through the lens of mythology, connecting it to water spirits and serpents from legends across cultures. These interpretations may not be official canon, but they highlight how deeply Milotic resonated with fans. Obscure competitive history also reveals unique uses of Milotic. Some trainers employed it specifically to counter weather-based strategies, leveraging its resilience to outlast teams built around rain or Sunday. Others used it as a status sponge, absorbing burns or paralysis and continuing to support their team. These creative applications gave it a reputation for subtle strength, a creature that rewarded thoughtfulness rather than brute force. By combining rarity, elegance, and practical utility, Milotic became more than just another addition to the Pokédex. It symbolized the values that defined Hoenn itself. Patience, culture, and beauty all played roles in its existence. For those who pursued it, the reward was not only a strong battler, but a companion whose very design reminded them of grace and transformation. In this way, Milotic's legacy has lasted far beyond its introduction, ensuring that it will always be remembered as one of Hoenn's most iconic and mysterious creations. Hoenn was the birthplace of weather as a true mechanic, and no single Pokémon represented that innovation more clearly than Castform. Introduced as a living experiment from the Weather Institute, this small cloud-like being carried with it one of the most unusual abilities in the series. Its power allowed it to change form depending on the weather conditions of battle, becoming a fiery sun spirit under harsh sunlight, a raindrop under pouring storms, and a snowbound creature under icy hail. With this design, the developers gave players a direct way to experience how climate could reshape not only the battlefield, but also the very identity of the creatures who lived within it. Castform was first obtained through story progression. The Weather Institute, perched along a route frequently battered by storms, served as a symbol of Hoenn's fascination with climate. After aiding the scientists against villainous intruders, the player was rewarded with Castform, an embodiment of the Institute's research. This gift was more than a rare Pokémonday. It was a narrative anchor that tied mechanics, lore, and story together. Players had just been introduced to dynamic weather effects and were immediately given a partner that changed form to reflect them. In that sense, Castform was less about strength and more about education, teaching players the significance of the very systems Hoenn introduced. Design choices for Castform reinforced this theme. Its base form was soft and cloud-like, almost neutral, representing a blank canvas. When sunlight filled the field, it became bright and radiant, a small orb of heat surrounded by golden flares. In the rain, it turned into a blue droplet, embodying the gentleness and relentlessness of storms. Under hail, it transformed into a crystalline snow figure, capturing the sharp chill of winter. These shifts were simple but effective, reminding players that the climate itself could alter nature in profound ways. One obscure detail often overlooked is that Castform's hail form existed in Ruby and Sapphire through the move Hail, but there was no natural overworld hail and no permanent hail ability until later generations, so players saw that form less often. At that time, permanent hail did not exist as a weather condition, meaning players rarely if ever witnessed its icy transformation. Only through temporary moves or later generations did its full potential appear consistently. This quirk turned Castform into a symbol of unrealized possibility, a Pokémon whose design anticipated mechanics that would take years to fully flourish. In competitive play, Castform never achieved dominance. Its stats were modest, and even with the ability to shift types and appearances, it struggled against more specialized opponents. Yet it held a unique place in the community. Creative players used it as a novelty, designing teams around its weather shifts to catch foes off guard. In casual battles, Castform became a conversation piece, an emblem of Hoenn's experimental nature. While it may not have climbed to the top of competitive tiers, it succeeded in embodying innovation, which was its true purpose. Cultural appearances gave Castform additional charm. In the anime, it appeared in episodes tied to weather, often demonstrating its transformations in playful ways. These appearances emphasized personality rather than power, reinforcing the idea that not all Pokémon were meant to be fearsome. Some existed to charm, to entertain, and to deepen the world through character. Fans often recall Castform fondly, not for victories in battle, but for its memorable role in teaching them how weather functioned in the games. Merchandise, though less abundant than for other popular Pokémon, highlighted its distinct forms. Figures and keychains allowed fans to switch between its sunny, rainy, and snowy appearances, reflecting the joy of watching it adapt. While not as commercially prominent as Hoenn starters or legendaries, Castform maintained a loyal following among those who valued quirky and unique designs. The Weather Institute itself, where Castform was first obtained, carried lore that further deepened its role. The researchers studied the effects of climate shifts on both humans and Pokémon, mirroring the real-world fascination with meteorology. Their work embodied Hoenn's narrative focus on balance between land, sea, and sky. Castform, as their creation and companion, stood as proof that humans and Pokémon together could explore the mysteries of nature. It was not born from legend, but from science and observation, a reflection of Hoenn's dual commitment to myth and experimentation. Obscure fan theories later tied Castform to larger narratives about weather in the region. Some speculated that its unusual power hinted at human attempts to understand or even control the same forces that Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza embodied. While no official lore confirmed this link, the idea resonated with players. Castform became not only an experiment of the Weather Institute, but a symbolic echo of Hoenn's primal legends, showing how mortals studied and mimicked the powers of gods. The remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire preserved Castform's uniqueness, but added greater accessibility to its hail form, finally allowing players to experience its full range more consistently. Seeing its snowy appearance in proper battles gave fans a sense of completion, as though a missing piece of its design philosophy had finally been realized. This continuation of its legacy demonstrated how Hoenn's innovations carried forward, influencing later generations in subtle ways. In contests, Castform also found a role. Its ability to alter appearance gave it charm across multiple categories, and its novelty often impressed judges. Though not as dominant as Milotic in beauty contests or other specialized performers, Castform offered variety, representing adaptability and creativity. For trainers who valued uniqueness, bringing it on stage was a way to celebrate the oddities of Hoenn's roster. Competitive history, though limited, produced memorable moments. Some players used Castform with weather-setting teammates to cycle through its forms mid-battle, a spectacle that entertained audiences even if it did not always produce victories. These instances reinforced its reputation as a show Pokémon, one valued for entertainment and creativity as much as for effectiveness. Its long-term cultural footprint rests not in dominance but in memory. Players often look back on Hoenn and recall Castform as one of the clearest symbols of that era's innovation. It stood as proof that the developers were willing to experiment boldly, even if the results were quirky or imperfect. For many, simply owning Castform felt like a reward, a reminder that Pokémon could be whimsical as well as powerful. By blending narrative, mechanics, and culture, Castform became an icon of experimentation. It may never have commanded fear in battle, but it commanded curiosity and affection. Through its shifting forms, it embodied the spirit of Hoenn itself, a region defined by weather, balance, and creativity. For those who raised it, Castform was a partner that reminded them of the wonder in exploring ideas, proof that innovation could be as memorable as power. Among the most enigmatic creatures to emerge from Hoenn was Absol, a dark-type Pokémon that carried with it an aura of misfortune and prophecy. From its first appearance outside Fortree, it stood apart from nearly every other wild encounter. The moment players read its description in the Pokédex, they realized this was not a normal Pokémon, but one burdened with a mythic reputation. Its very presence told a story, one that blurred the line between lore and gameplay. Absol was known as the Disaster Pokémonday Pokédex records, described it as appearing before natural calamities, a herald whose arrival foretold storms, earthquakes, and landslides. For many trainers, this gave it an aura of dread. Unlike titans such as Groudon or Kyogre that directly shaped the world, Absol's role was subtler. It did not cause destruction but signaled its approach, a messenger rather than a force of nature itself. This distinction, however, was often lost on the people of Hoenn. Villagers who saw Absol descend from the mountains assumed that its appearance summoned the disasters that followed. As a result, it became misunderstood and mistrusted, a symbol of tragedy rather than of warning. Design choices emphasize this theme of misinterpretation. Absol's sleek white body contrasted with its dark blue features, creating a duality of light and shadow. Its mane flowed like a comet's tail, giving it elegance, while the scythe-shaped horn on its head evoked an image of harvesting or cutting, further fueling associations with death and catastrophe. Yet the horn was not a weapon but a tool, said to sense minute shifts in the atmosphere and land, allowing Absol to predict disasters before they struck. The contrast between its ominous appearance and its true benevolent purpose became the heart of its legend. Obscure development notes suggest that Absol was designed to embody misunderstood warnings. Early concept sketches show variations where its horn was longer or curved more aggressively, making it appear threatening. Developers ultimately chose a balance, ensuring it retained mystery without looking overtly villainous. This careful design underscored the narrative intent. Absol was feared because of ignorance, not malice. In competitive play, Absol mirrored its lore. It was fragile but immensely powerful in offense, a glass cannon that struck decisively but fell quickly if left exposed. Its base attack stat was among the highest for non-legendary dark types of its era, and moves like Swords Dance allowed it to amplify its already formidable strength. Later generations introduced Night Slash, a move that paired perfectly with its high critical hit chance, cementing Absol as a Pokémon that could turn the tide in an instant. Yet just as in its lore, its power came with misfortune. One mistimed move or a single strong hit could topple it, leaving trainers to reflect on its role as a creature bound to tragedy. The rarity of Absol's wild appearances also added to its mystique. Found on routes near Fortree, it appeared infrequently, making encounters feel special. Players often recalled the moment they first stumbled upon one, surprised by its unusual design and ominous reputation. Its scarcity enhanced the idea that it was not a common companion, but a prophet glimpsed only in times of change. Cultural impact carried Absol far beyond the games. In the anime, it appeared in episodes centered on natural disasters. These portrayals reinforced its lore, showing it as a misunderstood guardian. Characters who listened to its warnings were spared tragedy, while those who dismissed it suffered consequences. This narrative deepened its role as a symbol of intuition, urging viewers to pay attention to signs even when they seemed frightening. Fans responded strongly to these portrayals, embracing Absol as a cult favorite. Obscure trivia highlights how Absol was tied to meteorology within Hoenn's lore. Some Pokédex entries mentioned it descending from mountain peaks before disasters struck, linking it to landslides and avalanches. Others suggested it appeared before storms, hinting at an ability to detect shifts in pressure. These details grounded it in realistic natural warning systems, making it less a fantasy creature and more a reflection of animals in the real world that sense quakes or storms before they occur. This blending of real phenomena with mythological storytelling gave Absol a depth rarely seen in Pokémon of its generation. Later, generations expanded its story with a Mega Evolution. When Absol Mega evolved, its flowing fur extended into wing-like appendages, transforming it into an angelic figure. This new form seemed designed to challenge the narrative of disaster. Rather than appearing ominous, Mega Absol looked divine, almost celestial, as though the misunderstood messenger had revealed its true nature. Many fans interpreted this as vindication, a visual statement that Absol had always been a guardian and never a harbinger of destruction. The megaform did not change the way the world saw it in lore, but for players, it became proof that beauty and truth could triumph over misjudgment. Competitive players also experimented with Mega Absol. It gained new abilities and greater speed, allowing it to strike even faster and harder. Yet it remained fragile, a reminder that even with wings of light, it was still bound to a fate of risk and reward. This balance kept its narrative consistent. Absol was destined to live on the edge, powerful yet vulnerable, prophetic yet feared. Fan culture kept Absol alive long after Hoenn. Its sleek design inspired artwork, stories, and even tattoos. Some fans interpreted it as a symbol of intuition and foresight, using it as a metaphor for paying attention to instincts. Others leaned into its association with tragedy, embracing it as an emblem of misunderstood truth. In both cases, Absol became more than a Pokémonday. It became a cultural figure, resonating with those who had felt misjudged or ignored. In spin-off games, Absol often appeared in roles tied to destiny. In the Mystery Dungeon series, it joined the player as a companion in stories about prophecy and disaster, further cementing its role as a guardian on the edge of catastrophe. These portrayals gave it more depth, allowing fans to see it not as an ominous omen, but as a partner who guided heroes through danger. Obscure competitive history also provides moments of fame. Some trainers used Absol as a surprise sweeper, relying on its critical hit potential to break through teams that underestimated it. Though not consistent in every metagame, it remained a beloved choice for players who valued risk and unpredictability. Its presence on a team often mirrored its lore. If fortune favored it, Absol could devastate an opponent, but if the tide turned, it fell swiftly, leaving its trainer with nothing but regret. Through all these facets, Absol stood as one of the most memorable Pokémon of Hoenn. It did not command the seas like Kyogre or expand the land like Groudon. It did not seal itself away in puzzles like the Regis. Instead, it walked quietly into human settlements, warning of storms and quakes, only to be shunned by those it tried to protect. This narrative made it timeless, a figure of tragedy and prophecy woven into the heart of Hoenn's mythology. For players who encountered it, trained it, or simply admired it from afar, Absol represented the complexity of truth, sometimes frightening to behold, often misunderstood, but always vital to those willing to listen. Across Hoenn's sprawling seas and countless islands, no location inspired more myths, debates, and rumors than Mirage Island. It was not a towering volcano, a ruin sealed by puzzles, or a city suspended in the trees. Instead, it was a simple strip of sand and grass hidden in plain sight, accessible only when fate aligned with improbable precision. For many players, it became the ultimate symbol of mystery in the third generation, a reminder that some secrets were designed not to be encountered by everyone. Mirage Island could only be seen when an invisible daily number within the game matched the internal value of a Pokémon in the player's party. This mechanic meant that the odds of it appearing were staggeringly low. Surfing along Route 130 might yield nothing but water for months or even years of play. To young trainers who did not yet read strategy guides or datamine code, Mirage Island seemed almost mythical. Children swapped stories about a hidden island with rare treasures, never sure if it truly existed. The mere possibility that it might suddenly surface transformed routine travel into a moment of suspense. When it did appear, the island revealed a quiet reward. Within its grasses roamed Wynote, a baby form connected to a far more famous psychic wall. For many players, it was their first time seeing this playful blue creature outside of breeding mechanics. The location also grew the rare Liechii berry, a fruit highly prized for raising attack during battle and nearly impossible to find elsewhere. These discoveries were subtle compared to the grandeur of legendaries, but that was the point. Mirage Island rewarded persistence and chance with understated treasures that carried meaning primarily for those who knew what they had uncovered. The rarity of Mirage Island's appearance gave rise to countless myths. Some believed that surfing with certain Pokémon increased the odds, while others claimed that specific days of the week were more favorable. Rumors even spread that talking repeatedly to the old man in Pacific Log Town, the only NPC who ever mentioned the island, could influence its chance of appearing. None of these theories were true, but they persisted because of how unlikely it was to see Mirage Island under normal conditions. The developers never confirmed any hidden mechanics beyond the simple random number match, and so the mystery only deepened. Design choices around the island reinforced its aura of transience. It did not appear on maps, and the game offered no notification when it surfaced. Only by returning to Pacific Log and listening to the old man would players learn that it was visible. This deliberate vagueness mirrored how sailors in real life told tales of phantom islands or vanishing lands that appeared in some voyages but not in others. By grounding Mirage Island in randomness and rumor, the developers tapped into centuries of maritime folklore. The cultural impact of this feature was immense. Online forums in the early 2000s filled with posts of disbelief, players demanding proof from others who claimed to have visited. Screenshots became treasured evidence, traded like modern artifacts of discovery. Guides emerged to explain the hidden number system, yet even then, the odds remained daunting. Trainers who actually set foot on Mirage Island wore it as a badge of honor, their achievement whispered about with the same reverence as catching a legendary. Obscure trivia about Mirage Island adds further intrigue. The Liechii berry obtainable there was part of a set of stat-boosting berries that could dramatically influence competitive battles. In official tournaments where items were scarce, having even one of these fruits gave a trainer an advantage. Yet because Mirage Island appeared so rarely, many players never gained access to them legitimately. The location thus bridged the gap between myth and practical play, with its obscurity shaping actual competition. The design of Wynote itself reinforced the mystery. This baby form, often overlooked, became associated with one of the rarest places in the game. Trainers who had never bred its evolved form suddenly encountered it here, connecting Mirage Island to the broader theme of patience and persistence. It was not a legendary guardian, but for those who found it, it became a memorable companion precisely because of the difficulty of reaching it. Later games paid subtle homage to Mirage Island by introducing new mechanics of rarity. Mirage spots in the remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire evoked the same feeling, though with less extreme odds. These nods showed that the legacy of the island endured, even as mechanics shifted. Developers seemed to recognize that its cultural impact had outgrown the original intent. Fan interpretations of Mirage Island extended into symbolism. Some saw it as a representation of fleeting opportunity, a reminder that not all secrets are meant for everyone to discover. Others interpreted it as a metaphor for patience, as only those who kept returning to the waters stood a chance of finding it. The mystique was less about the island itself and more about the emotions it created: anticipation, doubt, and wonder. In anime and spin-off material, Mirage Island rarely appeared, which only fueled its myth. When it did receive brief acknowledgement, it was portrayed as a place of serenity, reinforcing the idea that rarity itself created value. Fans often wished for expanded stories exploring the island's significance, but part of its charm was how little was explained. Mystery was its essence, and overexposure would have dulled that magic. Competitive players who managed to harvest lychee berries sometimes used them to create strategies that hinged on precise activation. Because the berry increased attack when health dropped, it allowed for dramatic comebacks. Stories circulated of trainers turning battles around thanks to an item harvested from a place most had never seen. This gave Mirage Island a subtle but lasting impact on competitive memory, despite its inaccessibility. Ultimately, Mirage Island became a cultural legend not because of its contents, but because of its rarity. It embodied the idea that discovery could be as powerful as power itself. Trainers who encountered it felt as though they had stepped into a secret chapter of the game, one hidden not by progression or difficulty, but by fate. That sense of luck and wonder remains part of its enduring identity. For Hoenn, Mirage Island symbolized the spirit of exploration. It encouraged players to keep surfing, to keep searching, even when the odds were against them. It whispered that hidden wonders might lie just beyond the horizon, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. In a region already defined by seas, storms, and balance, Mirage Island reminded players that nature does not always yield its treasures willingly. Sometimes it demands patience, luck, and belief. And when the island finally surfaced, the reward was not only what was found upon its sands, but the memory of the journey itself, a tale that players carried long after the Game Boy Advance screen faded to black. Hidden along a quiet route east of Mauville stood one of Hoenn's most playful and mysterious locations, the Trick House. Unlike legendary caves or elemental shrines, this peculiar place offered no titanic battles or mythical lore. Instead, it challenged players with puzzles, riddles, and labyrinths that changed over time. For many trainers, it became an unforgettable curiosity, a reminder that not every secret in Pokémon was about power. Some were about wit, patience, and discovery. The Trick House was operated by an eccentric figure known simply as the Trick Master. When the player first entered, he would be found concealed in unusual spots within the house, crouched behind furniture or tucked away under a table. This element of humor set the tone for the location. It was not a shrine to ancient legends, but a playground built around clever design. The Trick Master invited trainers to navigate mazes that tested their mastery of hidden machines, field moves, and logical thinking. Each challenge within the house was tied to progress in the story. As players advanced through Hoenn, new rooms opened that required the use of specific abilities such as Cut, Rock Smash, or Strength. These puzzles forced trainers to revisit the house multiple times, rewarding those who returned with rare items, TMs, and the satisfaction of outsmarting the Trickmaster. Unlike most side content that could be completed in a single visit, the Trick House unfolded gradually, reflecting the growth of the trainer's journey. Obscure details reveal how the Trick House was designed to teach players. By creating environments that required field moves, it reinforced their importance outside of battle. Many children who had grown accustomed to using these abilities only when blocked by obstacles suddenly realized they could be applied in creative ways. In this sense, the Trickmaster was less a prankster and more a teacher disguised in humor. The cultural impact of the Trick House was subtle but enduring. Players fondly recall the quirky dialogue of the Trickmaster, his over-the-top boasts, and the satisfaction of finding him hidden in plain sight. The location broke the mold of traditional dungeons, adding a sense of lighthearted fun to a game that often focused on balance between primal forces. It was a reminder that Hoenn was not only about myths of land, sea, and sky, but also about human creativity and playfulness. In competitive history, the Trick House had little direct influence, but its rewards mattered. TMs obtained there included moves that shaped strategies in subtle ways. For young trainers, this was often their first introduction to techniques they would later see dominating competitive play. By tying these moves to puzzles, the developers ensured that learning them felt like a personal achievement. Obscure trivia also notes that the Trick House contained hints of cut content. Some unused data suggested additional puzzles were planned, but never implemented. Fans have speculated for years about what these lost challenges might have been, imagining elaborate mazes or riddles that pushed creativity even further. The incomplete nature of the Trick House only deepened its mystery. In remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the Trick House returned largely intact, preserving its whimsical spirit. For many fans, revisiting it after more than a decade felt like rediscovering a childhood memory. The Trickmaster's dialogue remained as flamboyant as ever, showing that his antics had aged well. The remakes even added subtle visual flourishes, modernizing the puzzles while keeping their core intact. Fan interpretations have painted the Trickmaster as more than just a prankster. Some view him as a meta character, representing the developers themselves. By hiding in plain sight and challenging players to think differently, he embodied the spirit of game design. Others see him as a reminder that even in a world of gods and disasters, humans could create mysteries of their own. These interpretations highlight the depth of what seemed at first to be a simple side activity. The Trick House also influenced later generations in small ways. Puzzle-filled dungeons in Sinnoh, Unova, and beyond carried echoes of its design. While no other region produced a character quite like the Trickmaster, the idea that hidden houses or side quests could teach mechanics became part of the franchise's DNA. This legacy ensures that the Trick House remains more than just a quirky memory. It is a piece of Pokémon history that shaped how players learned and explored. Ultimately, the Trick House embodied Hoenn's sense of balance. The region offered myths of primal forces, but it also gave players puzzles built on humor and ingenuity. Together, these experiences created a world that felt rich and varied, a place where mysteries were not only cosmic, but also personal. For those who ventured into its changing rooms, the Trick House became a story of laughter, frustration, and discovery. and in a game filled with legends, that may be its greatest achievement. Hidden beneath Hoenn's surface lay one of the most complex and mysterious puzzles the series had ever attempted. Long before players confronted the primal powers of Groudon or Kyogre, many found themselves intrigued by the strange ruins that dotted the region. These ancient structures held the key to awakening a trio of guardians known as the Regis, beings tied not to the sea or the sky, but to elemental forces of stone, ice, and steel. For many, unlocking their chambers became one of the most memorable challenges of the third generation, blending myth, history, and cryptic design. The Regis consisted of three beings: Regirock, Regis, and Registeel. Each was sealed away in its own chamber, guarded by puzzles written in Braille. To even access these chambers, players first had to uncover the sealed chamber on Route 134, a hidden cave revealed only by diving beneath strong currents. Inside lay walls inscribed with Braille, instructing the player to use specific moves and actions that seemed almost nonsensical at the time. For children who did not know Braille, this was an immense challenge. Many had to rely on guides, magazines, or trial and error to decode the instructions. The puzzles were deliberately cryptic. One message required players to bring a Relicanth and a Wailord, arranging them in specific slots within the party. This unusual requirement tied obscure and hard-to-obtain Pokémon to the awakening of the Regis, adding to their mystery. Once the chamber was activated, tremors spread across Hoenn, unsealing the doors of the three guardians. For many players, the experience of solving this puzzle felt like uncovering an ancient myth hidden within the cartridge itself. Each guardian reflected its elemental theme. Regirock's body was composed of boulders and stones, symbolizing raw endurance and permanence. Regis appeared as a crystalline figure of pure ice, evoking the ancient glaciers. Registeel was a metallic construct, sleek and symmetrical, representing human-like craftsmanship and durability. Their designs suggested beings not of natural evolution, but of deliberate creation, guardians built to protect secrets long forgotten. Obscure trivia adds depth to their legend. The choice of Braille was a deliberate decision by the developers to include a real-world script for the first time in the series. This design not only educated players about Braille, but also reinforced the theme of hidden knowledge. Many fans recall borrowing or printing Braille translation charts just to solve the puzzles. For some, the Regis became their first exposure to the language, creating a lasting impression beyond the games themselves. In battle, each guardian embodied bulk and resilience. Their offensive power was modest, but their defenses were immense. Competitive players experimented with them as walls, particularly in formats that valued staying power. Moves like Curse and Amnesia allowed them to fortify their already durable forms, while Explosion gave them the option of sacrificing themselves to take down a foe. Though not as iconic as other legendaries, the Regis carved a niche as defensive cornerstones. Cultural impact of the Regis extended beyond mechanics. Their puzzles created playground legends, with children whispering theories about what else might be unlocked by decoding Braille walls. Some claimed there was a hidden Regigigas in Ruby and Sapphire years before it was introduced in Sinnoh. Others speculated about additional guardians, such as Regifire or Regiwater, believing that more chambers lay undiscovered. These rumors reflected the sense of awe the Regis inspired. They were not just Pokémon, but fragments of a larger mythology that fans longed to understand. In the anime, the Regis appeared as powerful protectors, often guarding ruins or serving as obstacles for protagonists. Their roles emphasized their identity as silent sentinels, ancient beings whose duty was not to interact with humans, but to stand vigil over secrets. This portrayal matched the experience of the games, where they did not appear in the wild, but only within sealed chambers, waiting for those who solved their riddles. Later games continued to expand their legacy. In Sinnoh, players encountered Regis, a colossal figure said to have created the original three. This revelation reframed the Hoenn Regis as constructs or servants of a greater being, adding layers to their myth. In Galar, two new guardians, Regieleki and Regidrago, were introduced, confirming that the Regis were part of a much larger pantheon than originally thought. For fans who remembered the Braille puzzles of Hoenn, these additions felt like long-awaited validation of the playground rumors. Fan interpretations have also given the Regis symbolic meaning. Some see them as reflections of human progress, each tied to a stage of civilization. Regirock represents the Stone Age, Regis the Ice Age, and Registeel the Industrial Age. This interpretation paints them not only as guardians, but as embodiments of history itself. Though never confirmed in official lore, the idea resonates because of how the Regis connect natural forces with human-like design. Obscure trivia also highlights their unique battle cries in the anime, which sounded mechanical and otherworldly. Unlike most Pokémon, whose voices carried hints of emotion, the Regis emitted robotic tones that unsettled viewers. These cries reinforced the idea that they were not creatures of flesh and blood, but constructs born of ancient power. In the remakes Omega, Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, the puzzles remained intact, though some details were streamlined. Players once again dove to the sealed chamber, decoded Braille, and awoke the Guardians. For many, revisiting the challenge after more than a decade felt nostalgic, a return to one of the most immersive mysteries the series had ever offered. The enduring presence of the Regis across generations demonstrates the strength of their design. Ultimately, the Regis represented a side of Hoenn often overshadowed by primal titans and weather wars. They reminded players that not all mysteries were grand battles or cosmic forces. Some were hidden in ruins, sealed by puzzles, waiting patiently for discovery. They blended real-world education with in-game lore, creating a legacy that extended far beyond their original debut. For those who solved their riddles, the reward was not just 3 new companions, but a sense of connection to something ancient and profound. Hoenn was the first region to make weather not simply a background detail, but a mechanic that shaped battles, exploration, and even the very identity of the land. Long before later generations refined the system, this tropical archipelago introduced players to a world where the environment itself could tip the scales of combat. Sunshine, rain, and sandstorms became more than visual effects. They became forces that dictated strategies, inspired designs, and tied directly into the myths of the region. When players first traveled across Hoenn, the emphasis on weather was obvious. Routes shifted between bright sunny days and torrential storms, and caves echoed with dripping water or blasts of heat. These environmental touches set the stage for one of the boldest innovations of the 3rd generation: weather effects that changed battle conditions. For the first time, a match could be dominated not only by type matchups, but by the climate of the field. In Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, 3 primary conditions defined the system. Sunlight strengthened fire-type attacks, while weakening water-type moves, creating an immediate advantage for certain strategies. Rain boosted water attacks and diminished fire, while also granting perfect accuracy to thunder, a move that had long been balanced by chance. Sandstorms chipped away at non-rock, ground, or steel types each turn, forcing trainers to rethink team composition. These shifts made battles feel dynamic, as though nature itself had joined the fray. Obscure trivia reveals that weather in Hoenn was designed not just for flavor, but for balance. Developers wanted to emphasize the primal struggle between land and sea, and the mechanics reflected that vision. Ruby focused on drought, Sapphire on rain, and Emerald on the clash between them. This narrative alignment between story and gameplay was groundbreaking. Players experienced firsthand how the legends of the region influenced their journey, not only in cutscenes, but in the mechanics of battle. The Weather Institute served as the narrative anchor for this system. Located on a storm-swept route, it was a place where scientists studied climate shifts. After rescuing them from villainous interference, players were rewarded with a Pokémon that embodied weather itself. This gift reinforced the theme that Hoenn was defined by environmental forces, and it gave trainers a partner designed specifically to demonstrate how weather mechanics worked. Competitive battling was transformed by weather's introduction. Entire teams were built around sustaining certain climates. Sunny day strategies empowered grass and fire types, while supporting abilities like chlorophyll, which doubled speed under sunlight. Rain Dance enabled water sweepers and activated Swift Swim, turning previously slow Pokémon into rapid attackers. Sandstorm chipped non-rock ground or steel types each turn and synergized with abilities like Sand Veil, creating powerful stalling strategies. These shifts changed the landscape of tournaments, forcing trainers to prepare for climates as carefully as they did for individual opponents. One obscure fact is that Sandstorm had unique synergy with moves like Hidden Power. Because Hidden Power's type was determined by a Pokémon's internal values, players often bred for specific variants. Under Sandstorm conditions, rock types not only withstood hits more easily, but also gained access to unusual coverage. This subtle interaction reflected how deeply weather permeated strategy, rewarding those who explored obscure combinations. Culturally, weather became one of Hoenn's defining features. Fans often recall their first encounter with a storm rolling across the overworld, or the moment they realized that thunder never missed under rain. The system made the world feel alive, as though nature itself responded to the presence of primal titans. Later generations would refine and expand weather mechanics, but the sense of wonder first took root in Hoenn. The myths of the region tied directly into these systems. Groudon was associated with drought and the expansion of land, while Kyogre embodied torrential rain and the vastness of the sea. Their conflict was not merely narrative but mechanical, played out in real time through the weather effects that shaped battles. When they clashed in Emerald, players witnessed a storm of mechanics colliding, with sunlight and rain shifting turn by turn. This dynamic encounter was one of the most cinematic moments of the era, achieved without elaborate cutscenes, but purely through gameplay. Fan theories extended the symbolism further. Some argued that weather in Hoenn reflected the fragility of balance in the natural world. Too much sun scorched the land, too much rain flooded it, and only careful harmony allowed life to flourish. This interpretation gave the system philosophical depth, transforming simple multipliers into lessons about moderation. Later games continued to build upon Hoenn's foundation. In Sinnoh, hail became a permanent weather condition with its own set of strategies. Unova introduced abilities that automatically summoned weather at the start of battle, escalating climate wars to a central feature of competitive play. Yet even as the mechanics grew more complex, Fans looked back to Hoenn as the region where it all began, a place where weather shifted from background flavor to a defining force. Obscure trivia also notes that Hoenn was the only region where permanent weather was introduced through legendaries. When Groudon or Kyogre appeared in battle, their abilities created endless sunlight or rain until countered. This mechanic was both revolutionary and controversial. In later generations, permanent weather was limited to a few turns unless extended by items. The change reflected how dominant the mechanic had been in Hoenn, where entire battles could be decided by which Titan controlled the skies. In anime adaptations, weather took center stage during arcs set in Hoenn. Episodes emphasized storms, droughts, and climate shifts as central conflicts, often tied to the myths of the region. These portrayals reinforced the idea that weather was not just a mechanic, but part of Hoenn's identity. Fans watching the series often recalled their own struggles with rain-boosted attacks or sandstorms that wore down their teams. Merchandise even reflected the theme. Toys, cards, and figurines often depicted the primal clash between land and sea, with weather effects illustrated dramatically. Trading cards highlighted the synergy between certain moves and climates, bringing the concept full circle. Ultimately, the weather of Hoenn stood as one of the most innovative mechanics of the third generation. It taught players that battles were not only about moves and types, but about the very environment in which those battles occurred. It linked story, mechanics, and culture into a seamless whole, and for those who experienced it, weather became one of the most memorable aspects of the journey, a symbol of how far the series had come in making its world feel alive. While Hoenn is often remembered for its primal legendaries and weather mechanics, the region also distinguished itself through locations that changed over time. These areas created an early sense of expansion and transformation within the world, long before later generations introduced concepts like the Isle of Armor or Crown Tundra. Shoal Cave, Mirage Tower, and other shifting environments gave players a feeling that the land itself was alive, offering different secrets depending on when and how it was explored. Shoal Cave was perhaps the most striking example. Located north of Moss Deep, it appeared at first to be a simple cavern, yet its layout shifted dramatically depending on the tides. At low tide, dry passages revealed piles of salt and new areas to explore. At high tide, water flooded the tunnels, opening different pathways while cutting off others. This dual structure forced players to return at different times of day if they wanted to fully uncover the cave's secrets. For many, this was their first encounter with a dungeon that changed with real-world time, a concept that encouraged patience and planning. The cave's rewards reinforced this theme of transformation, collecting shoal salt and shoal shells across both tide conditions allowed trainers to craft the Shell Bell, an item that restored health when dealing damage. This obscure mechanic rewarded those who paid attention to the tides and dedicated themselves to revisiting the cave multiple times. It also linked narrative and gameplay, showing that patience and persistence yielded valuable results. In Emerald, Mirage Tower appeared on Route 111. Unlike permanent landmarks, the tower was not always present. It materialized at random, a spire of stone rising from the desert sands. Inside, players navigated fragile floors that collapsed beneath their feet, requiring the mock bike to cross safely. The challenge was not only to reach the top, but to master the mechanics of speed and precision. At the summit lay fossils, rare relics of the past that hinted at prehistoric life within Hoenn. What made Mirage Tower fascinating was its impermanence. Players could spend hours crossing the desert, without ever seeing it, then suddenly stumble upon the structure and unlock ancient treasures. This randomness gave it the same aura of myth that surrounded Mirage Island, though the tower was more forgiving in its odds of appearance. The combination of rarity, puzzle mechanics, and fossil rewards made it one of Hoenn's most memorable side locations. Obscure trivia reveals that Shoal Cave and Mirage Tower reflected the developers' early experiments with dynamic environments. While Kanto and Johto were largely static, Hoenn dared to create areas that shifted with time or chance. These experiments paved the way for later regions to introduce seasonal changes, daily events, and eventually entire downloadable expansions. The seeds of concepts that would one day become vast expansions were already present in these modest caves and towers. Culturally, these areas became favorites among dedicated explorers. Players shared stories about missing a tide change by only minutes or spending hours scouring the desert for Mirage Tower. Guides and magazines of the early 2000s highlighted these features, presenting them as secrets to be uncovered rather than obvious parts of the main journey. For many children, discovering them without outside help felt like stumbling upon a hidden world. The Shoal Cave also inspired myths within the community. Some speculated that different Pokémon appeared at different tides, or that hidden items were available only during certain phases. While not all of these theories were accurate, they contributed to the sense of wonder. Similarly, Mirage Tower sparked rumors about additional fossils or hidden chambers, leading many to search its crumbling floors for secrets that did not exist. These myths reflected the way Hoenn encouraged imagination. In competitive play, the shell bell obtained from Shoal Cave rarely made headlines, but it did find niche use. Trainers appreciated its ability to provide gradual healing during drawn-out battles, especially for bulky attackers. The fossils from Mirage Tower had a greater impact, introducing ancient creatures that became part of Hoenn's broader ecosystem. While not dominant forces, they added depth and variety to the competitive scene, proving that even obscure side locations could leave a mark on battling culture. Later games built upon these ideas. Sinnoh introduced the underground with shifting treasures. Unova implemented seasons that altered landscapes, and Galar created entire expansions dedicated to changing environments. Yet the foundation was laid in Hoenn, where Shoal Cave and Mirage Tower showed that the world could evolve alongside the player. By tying exploration to time and chance, the region demonstrated that discovery was not always about strength, but about curiosity and patience. Fan interpretations added symbolic meaning to these features. Shoal Cave's tides were seen by some as a metaphor for cycles in life, teaching players that opportunities could appear and vanish depending on timing. Mirage Tower, by contrast, represented fleeting chances, urging trainers to seize rare moments when they appeared. These interpretations may not have been intended by the developers, but they resonated because they captured the feelings these locations inspired. Obscure details about the fossils also added intrigue. In the original games, players could choose only one fossil, forcing a decision that felt permanent. This choice linked directly to Mirage Tower's impermanence, as the other fossil sank into the sands, lost forever. Only through later events in Emerald could trainers obtain the second fossil, adding a layer of exclusivity that fueled discussions for years. The remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire revisited these areas with care. Shoal Cave retained its tide-based mechanics, delighting longtime fans who remembered collecting salt and shells. Mirage Tower was replaced by a different fossil event, but the spirit of fleeting discovery remained. These updates showed respect for the legacy of Hoenn's changing landscapes, ensuring they continued to inspire wonder in a new generation. Ultimately, Shoal Cave, Mirage Tower, and similar locations demonstrated the ambition of Hoenn's design. They reminded players that the world could feel alive, shifting with time and chance. They encouraged revisiting areas, rewarding patience, and embracing mystery. In a region defined by balance between land, sea, and sky, these dynamic places showed that even the smallest caves and towers carried meaning. For those who explored them, the experience was unforgettable, a lesson that discovery itself could be as thrilling as any battle. Hoenn was not only a region of weather wars, shifting caves, and primal titans. It was also a land where myths grew around rare encounters, where playground stories and cultural whispers shaped how trainers viewed certain creatures. These myths often blurred fact and fiction, weaving tales of impossible odds, mysterious evolutions, and encounters so elusive that they became part of the region's identity. In this way, Hoenn reminded players that rarity itself could give rise to legend. One of the earliest myths surrounded Feebas. This plain-looking fish was found on only a handful of water tiles scattered across specific routes. Its appearance was so rare that many believed it required hidden conditions or even secret items to lure it out. Guides eventually revealed the truth, yet the legend of Feebas endured. It became synonymous with patience and obsession, a living reminder that beauty often lay hidden behind layers of difficulty. When it finally evolved into its elegant form, the contrast between its humble beginnings and its stunning transformation felt almost mythological. Another creature tied to folklore was Absol, known as the disaster Pokémon. It was said to appear before calamities struck. Children often whispered that seeing one in the wild meant their save file was cursed, or that bad luck would follow in real life. While the truth was that it simply sensed natural shifts, the myth persisted because of its ominous design and rare appearances. Absol became a symbol of fate, feared and revered at the same time, a being caught between prophecy and misunderstanding. Spiritomb, introduced later through the Crown Tundra, retroactively influenced how players looked back on Hoenn's rare Pokémonday. The puzzle to unlock it echoed the complexity of the Regis, fueling theories that earlier games had similar undiscovered secrets. Fans speculated that ruins scattered across Hoenn might have once held comparable puzzles, their keys lost to time. Though no evidence ever surfaced, the speculation itself became part of the culture. Obscure myths also surrounded creatures like Beldum. This steel psychic Pokémon could be found only in a single location after the main story, hidden in a house gifted to the player. Its rarity and unusual method of acquisition sparked countless rumors. Some believed it was tied to meteorites found in Moss Deep, while others speculated it was a gift from extraterrestrial forces. These theories were never confirmed, but they reflected how scarcity invited imagination. The community also created legends about Mirage Island. Its connection to Wineout made the baby Pokémon more mysterious than its design suggested. Because so few trainers ever encountered the island, many believed Wineout itself was unobtainable without cheats or special events. Stories circulated about entire cartridges that never generated the matching number needed to reveal the island, as though fate had permanently locked some players out of the experience. Fan interpretations extended even to fossils. The one-time choice between claw and root fossil led to debates about which was truly stronger, with some children insisting that choosing one over the other permanently influenced the rest of the game. While these claims were unfounded, they highlighted how permanent choices in Hoenn fostered myth-making. The idea that a single decision could alter destiny echoed through discussions long after the games were released. Obscure trivia reinforced these myths. Many players first encountered rumors in magazines, playground chatter, or early online forums. With limited access to official information, children often accepted hearsay as fact. Some claimed that evolving a Feebas required completing contests under specific conditions, while others swore that Mirage Island could be forced to appear by talking to the Pacifidlog Elder at a certain time of day. These myths reveal how secrecy and obscurity created fertile ground for stories that enriched the experience of playing. Culturally, these myths shaped how Hoenn was remembered. Long after players had caught Groudon or Kyogre, they still talked about the mysteries of Feebas tiles, the ominous horned figure of Absol, and the fleeting shores of Mirage Island. These stories carried into later generations, where new players heard legends from older siblings or online forums and set out to confirm them for themselves. In this way, Hoenn's myths extended beyond the cartridge, living in the culture of fans. The anime occasionally touched upon these myths, though in more playful ways. Episodes featuring Absol or Mirage Island leaned into their mysterious reputations, presenting them as misunderstood or elusive. These portrayals reinforce the idea that even within the broader Pokémon world, rarity could shape reputation. For fans who had struggled to find these creatures in the games, seeing them animated felt like acknowledgement of their efforts. Later titles built upon this legacy. Remakes preserved the obscurity of Feebas, though with modern conveniences that made it slightly more accessible. Mirage Island inspired Mirage Spots, a new set of rare locations that rotated daily. These continuations showed that the developers understood the power of myth-making. By preserving difficulty and chance, they ensured that new generations of players would experience the same sense of wonder and frustration. Competitive play occasionally elevated these rare creatures. Metagross, the final evolution of Beldum, became a powerhouse in tournaments, proving that sometimes the most obscure beginnings led to greatness. Milotic, once hidden behind beauty contests, found a niche as a durable wall. Even Absol, fragile as it was, carved out moments of glory with its devastating critical hits. These successes gave the myths of Hoenn practical weight, turning rumor and frustration into triumph. Fan culture continues to celebrate these legends. Artworks depict Feebas as a symbol of persistence, Absol as a tragic prophet, and Mirage Island as a place of dreams. Online discussions still debate the exact odds of encountering certain features, with modern data finally revealing numbers that once felt like mysteries. Yet even with perfect knowledge, the myths retain their charm. They remind players of a time when discovery relied not on guides, but on curiosity, patience, and community. Ultimately, the myths and legends of Hoenn's rarest Pokémon illustrate how obscurity and difficulty enrich storytelling. They show that a game can foster wonder not only through scripted cutscenes or dramatic battles, but through the simple act of making something hard to find. For those who pursued these mysteries, the reward was not just a rare Pokémon or a hidden item, but the story they carried with them. Tales of fishing endlessly for Feebas, of waiting fruitlessly for Mirage Island, or of finally solving the Regis's Braille puzzle became part of their personal journeys. And in a series built upon adventure, these personal legends were as meaningful as any battle against a champion.